I'm State Representative Ryan Aument, and we're here at LaTorte Elementary School in Washington Borough in the heart of the 41st Legislative District, and I'm here joined by Representative Bryan Cutler.
Hi, Bryan Cutler from the 100th District in southern Lancaster County. Representative Aument and I have the privilege of sharing the Penn Manor School District, and today we're here to discuss a neat project that's going on here in Penn Manor, and that's them being part of the Teacher Evaluation Pilot Program. We have with us here this afternoon Dr. Licklider, who's the superintendent, and Mr. Berry, who I've recently learned is a 39-year veteran in the education realm, so welcome.
Thank you.
I guess it probably would be best to start out. Dr. Licklider, could you give a little bit of background how you got enrolled in the state program to help run the pilot program?
Well, last year the Department of Education contacted all the superintendents telling us that they were participating in a statewide pilot and asked for volunteer districts. And it also coincided with some conversations we were having in Penn Manor about our own teacher evaluation system and the request from some administration as well as some teachers to provide some opportunities for teachers to grow through the process. The process we were using we didn't feel was as informative. So the timing worked perfectly. We volunteered and the state graciously accepted us into the pilot program.
Very good.
Mr. Berry, you've been here, or not necessarily here, but have been teaching for 39 years. So you certainly weren't required to be part of this teacher evaluation pilot. How did you decide to be part of the pilot? And I'm assuming you volunteered, and be curious as to why.
Early in the fall, we got an email from Dr. Licklider explaining the pilot program, and I thought about it, and I thought, well, is it something I really want to get involved in? I've been involved in all the different aspects of education for so long that I've seen a lot of different changes take place. And this kind of piqued my interest because it talked about teacher effectiveness piloting and growth, not necessarily just teacher observation and looking at the teacher and responding to the teacher. So I wanted to see how this program would help me become a better teacher and what kind of professional growth I could have from it. So that's why I chose to be part of it.
Well, I think that brings up a very valid point. I think that there would have to be some benefits both from the administrative standpoint as well as from the teacher's professional development standpoint. Would you mind both sharing some insight on what you hope to get from the program in that regard?
Sure. The process is based on Charlotte Danielson's work, who is a national expert on teacher effectiveness observations. So the pilot program really is based in research and an effective way to have conversations about the classroom and what instruction it is. And I think Mr. Berry made the good point that it's not just about observing teachers. It's number one about setting some goals, having conversations about instruction in the classroom, what's working, what's not effective for students, and how we can affect change organically through the classroom process. And I think it's equally as beneficial to administration as it is to teachers, because you can have conversations about what are the needs of our classroom, what are the needs of our district, and through that process, through the observation process, and then the post-observation process, you can come to some conclusions of areas that not just necessarily the teacher but also the district can improve, and how can we focus our professional development opportunities for our staff so that we're continually challenging our students, especially in the 21st century with all the changes that we see around us.
Mr. Berry, after you agreed to be part of this pilot, what were some of the next steps after that? Has there been some training that you've been involved in? What has been the process to prepare to be part of Phase 2 of this pilot program?
Probably the biggest training that I had was in January when we had a 4-hour meeting in the IU where we were trained in the Danielson method. We met with a group of other teachers from other districts, and professionals from IU 13 went through the whole process with us, explaining the 4 different domains and how we would go through each step and what would be necessary for it. That training, as well as what we did incidentally in just talking between Mike and I and my principal, Shirley Murray, we set the stage for them coming to observe me and going through the different steps.
Could you give an overview, Dr. Licklider, of the school district's involvement? How many teachers do you have involved, and where are you now in the process?
We have about 380 teachers throughout the school district, and we put this out purely voluntarily. So we had amazingly, I guess not so amazingly because we have a great staff, but we had 100 volunteers who said, I'd like to be part of this. And as we went through the statewide training as administrators, one of the points that was made to us is while you're learning this process, because of the intensity of it, you may not want to have 100 people in the pilot. So we have right now around 40 people who are working on this in the pilot phase. And Mr. Berry was one of the observations that I was privileged to take part in just a few weeks ago. So as part of that, we did a pre-conference. We talked about his objectives for the lesson, and Mr. Berry can talk a little bit more about the lesson. But we did some pre-conference, what we should be looking for. When we did the actual observation, one of the pieces with this that I like is it's not a subjective process. You're actually looking for evidence, and you have to put down very objective statements about what is actually occurring in the lesson. Then as a result, you have a post-conference where you discuss the different elements of the lesson and then pick out some places where the teacher, in this case Mr. Berry, wanted to do some professional growth. So you pick out a goal and then you do some follow-up short-term walkthrough observations on a much shorter basis, looking for those specific goals so that you have continued conversation as an administrator and as a professional teacher on how we're progressing and improving it. And with Mr. Berry, who's a 39-year veteran and a very well-respected person in this community, I think it speaks of our teaching staff that Mr. Berry said, there's places that I can grow after 39 years. And that really is what the process is about, making sure we're improving teaching for our children.
In regards to the pre and the post conference, as well as your participation in the program, what are you hoping to get out of it, as well as any feedback that you may have already gotten?
My biggest wish was suggestions for professional growth, because when you're in the classroom, you're pretty much in an island, and the children love whatever you do because you're the teacher. But you need to have outside feedback. You need to know what you're doing is educationally sound and it's beneficial, and that you're following the state standards and all the requirements that are expected of a professional. So to have an adult come in with an educational background and look and examine what you're doing, and in this case, mirror what you're doing and bring it back to you and say, this is what you did. How do you feel about that? For me, that was tremendously helpful, because I could look at what I did and what I said and say, I'm happy with that, I'm not happy with that, and where do I go from here? Now, the where do I go from here was a post-conference where we looked at the different rubrics in going through the post-conference, and we pinpointed a weakness in organizational strategies, which I know is a weakness of mine, but also another pinpoint was on the academic side, where we want to use the assessments results of what we did in the classroom and how to use that to change my instruction, which is gave me an opportunity to walk away with an academic goal also. So I have those two areas to work on, and they're always in the back of my mind now, which they weren't before. So
it's certainly good to hear. Dr. Licklider, what if any challenges do you have as an administrator, recognizing obviously there's a vast variety of teacher talent that you have that works in the Penn Manor School District, as well as a difference in student levels. So how do you equalize all that through this program?
Well, and everyone's at a different point in their career. But I think that the important thing is we can always do something better. And one of the emphasis with the observation model is not what we're doing wrong, but what again can we do in a more effective way. And that's why I like the process with the 4 domains. You're looking at 4 different areas of teaching, and you're able to find something for everyone where we can make improvements. So I think as a district, it's looking at, number one, the individual strengths and the individual needs, but then putting all those needs together and seeing where there's commonality. Where are there needs that are similar across districts, across buildings, across grade levels, and then as a school district, how can we go about making some improvements to help develop those areas?
I imagine anytime you have a discussion with teachers and you're talking about the evaluation process, there's going to be some perhaps pushback, but fear of changing a system. And so what has been the feedback that you've had from educators? What are some of the concerns, perhaps fear that they have about an evaluation system and the statewide pilot and perhaps legislation that may lead to a new statewide teacher evaluation system?
With the statewide evaluation system, I think if you look at it in two different parts, the part that we're dealing with the pilot is really on the observation evaluation method and how to improve the instruction in the classroom. And the statewide legislation is looking at two different parts, 50% being the observation, 50% being the multiple measures. I would say there's universal agreement on the part of the pilot that we're involved with. In fact, it's been such a positive experience that we actually have a committee of teachers and administrators with representatives from our local education association, Penn Manor Education Association, which is part of PSEA, and the teachers have been incredibly supportive and positive about that aspect of the observation model. In fact, we are going ahead and making some changes to how we observe based on this pilot, and we're implementing it whether or not it's implemented statewide. So that part, I would say, you'll find universal agreement. Really, the part of the debate is on the other method. How do you use assessment scores to also form part of that observation? And there I would say there's more question just because of the nature of standardized testing to begin with.
And I would have to piggyback on that. I would think that from what I've heard of the people who have participated in the teacher observation part, they're all very supportive of it. The trepidation is, how are we going to use this other 50%? Right. And how is that going to be used in order to evaluate the teachers and evaluate the system? So we need to look at that. We need to look at that carefully and educate people about it. And the big issue, I think, with the pilot was education. Once people knew what was going on and what was expected and that it wasn't a witch hunt per se, they were much more comfortable with it. And the more people who take that or have that experience, the more we can speak to it and say, it is a valuable experience.
But I think I have one of the best faculties around, and the universal response I've received from being part of the pilot is, with anything new, there's some trepidation. Right. And the universal response I receive from the staff is, we need to be part of this to help inform the process and lend our voice to it, and to do it in a positive, productive way, because we all, I think, regardless of our feelings on any single aspect, we all want what's best for our children and to make the right changes for the system.
Right.
Well, as we wrap up here, obviously, I'm sure you're hopeful that the program completes as well as it initially started. I guess my question would be this: would you have any advice or things that you would change going forward, as far as feedback as being part of the pilot program?
I think the most important thing that what we're wrestling with right now is to do anything and to do it well takes time. And that's the biggest aspect of the observation. Our current observation model takes probably per observation about 1 hour a teacher. With the new observation method, it takes, I think a fair assessment is about 2.5 hours per teacher. So you're already adding time to something that is a busy day for both teachers and administrators. And when you're expanding it greatly, you have to revise and adapt what you're already doing. We think it's of value, so we think we have to create time to do that. But it means making other adaptations in other parts of our supervision model. So I would say the time is the biggest element, because we want to do it, and we want to do it well, but we think it's a worthwhile venture to continue.
And I would have to piggyback on that. I think time is of an essence. The time that we put in just preparing for it, and even just scheduling to get everybody scheduled together, was more difficult than the observation process itself. There's so many people involved in this case because it was a pilot. There were 2 different administrators as well as myself in the classroom, and we had to work around all those schedules. And if something happened to upset that schedule, luckily it didn't snow this year, so we didn't have that issue to worry about. But that is something that the time element, in the back of my mind, that would be my biggest issue. Another concern that I had was the paperwork involved. If we were to pursue this model, we might want to pursue it more on an electronic basis. only because the paperwork would be just a nightmare.
All right, well, thank you very much. I want to thank both of you for participating in the pilot program. I certainly look forward to the feedback, and I'm sure this is going to be an issue. I know that's very important to Representative Aument since he has the House bill, and I'm sure that feedback will be very meaningful going forward, so thank you.
Thank you very much for your time and your work on this project. If you have any additional questions on what we've discussed here today, please feel free to contact either one of our district offices.